Before we get started, I would like to thank Capcom for the opportunity and giving me these early review copies of Resident Evil Requiem for both Steam and the PlayStation 5, as well as some cool swag for helping out with the charity marathon. It's greatly appreciated and was very unexpected, so in short, I guess you can say this review is brought to you by the makers themselves. Thanks, guys. So, here we are. It is the year 2026, and once again, we are faced with a brand new Resident Evil game. Now, according to what the trailers look like they've promised, it's sure to be quite the incredible outing. Quite a nostalgic experience even, facing the ghosts of our past, and probably even meeting new characters and old characters that we thought might have been lost to time since, say, Resident Evil Outbreak. That was a deep cut, wasn't it? Hey there, I'm William Morris, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you're a regular who's been watching us after all these years, welcome back. Now, the Resident Evil series, I admit, is not something we've talked a whole lot about on this channel, and it's not that I haven't wanted to. We are certainly no strangers to it. And frankly, I wouldn't mind taking the time out to perhaps do a whole line of reviews covering the whole series from its humble beginnings all the way up until this point. I want to stress that out of respect for Capcom's guidelines and desires, this review will be spoiler-free. Now, I've already seen some worrisome fans out there have some dire questions that are in need of answering, so I'll be sure to tackle those right now. At least, as many as I can. In which case, there's only two. Is the game good? The short and easiest answer is yes. If you are a longtime Resident Evil fan, it's safe to say that the game does deliver in many ways, from Easter eggs to nostalgic moments, to exploring the depth of iconic legacy characters and even exploring the emotions and feelings of new ones. The game still retains many of its natural Resident Evil vibes, which I will get into, but as for whether or not you're getting a good experience, I can answer as a longtime fan myself that you indeed are. Resident Evil Requiem is unquestionably more rewarding to those who have been with the series, and it does know this. But that's not to say that newcomers can't hop on and still enjoy the experience, especially from the point of view of Resident Evil's newest protagonist, Grace Ashcroft. Follow-up question: is the game long or short? With the exception of Resident Evil 4 being quite a lengthy experience, that definitely gave you all the bang for your buck, Resident Evil 9 falls into the standard Resident Evil fare of length. My first playthrough took me a little over 7 hours to complete, and I'd say that's about on par for what you could expect from, say, Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake. Perhaps Resident Evil 5 as well. So on the surface, it might not seem that long, but ultimately it comes down to you as a player. How much exploring are you willing to do? How stumped do you get on the puzzle solving or problem solving? How well can you keep your resources up? How soon can you figure out how to progress? That being said, the game does have its share of replay value as well, with bonus unlockables and plenty of challenges that undoubtedly will require several playthroughs to see and unlock everything and reap the rewards. So rest assured, you are getting the traditional Resident Evil fare here. There do exist plenty of other questions, but those ones lean far into the spoiler territory that I do have to avoid talking about them. But we can talk about at least my experiences. Up to a point. Resident Evil 9 Requiem was directed by Koshi Nakanishi. This man is known for previously directing what many would consider to be the resurrection of the Resident Evil series with RE7. And it's very clear shortly after you begin this new adventure that you can feel the man's influence. Several features return from that adventure, such as the first-person view, which is thankfully optional now, and while I did experiment with it, for the sake of consistency, I decided to keep things in the third person because, hey, I personally enjoy being able to see the character that I am playing as instead of, from the back of their head. It's just how I always roll. It does not break any immersion or harm the experience, and I'm grateful that the game does give you plenty of options when it comes to how you want to control your characters. Another feature I was very glad that they included that I don't recall seeing before was the option to reverse the run and walking control. I always found it kind of tiring how in previous games you had to press and or hold a dedicated button to make your characters run. And frankly, I'm shocked it took this long to finally have the option for it to be reversible, because why would I want to hold onto a button or have to keep pressing one for a normal move that I want my characters to be doing most of the time, you know? So having this option was a big win for me. You take control of Grace Ashcroft, an FBI analyst that is the daughter of another lesser-known Resident Evil character, Alyssa Ashcroft. And for those who aren't aware, back on the PlayStation 2, there was a little game called Resident Evil Outbreak that was a single-player / multiplayer online Resident Evil game that took place on that fateful night in Raccoon City when all hell broke loose in 1998. I myself never really got to play it much because I didn't have an online connection with my PS2, but thankfully you could still get some enjoyment out of it out of the single-player campaign. You just had to put up with the AI, but this is where Alyssa Ashcroft was first revealed, as one of the many playable characters in that one. So already, Resident Evil 9 makes some pretty wild deep cuts in the member berries department. Grace is tasked by her employer to explore a hotel which may be connected to a new string of questionable deaths that are in some way related to this new disease called Raccoon City Syndrome. And don't worry, I'm not really spoiling anything yet. This is stuff that was pretty much gathered through trailers if you were paying attention. The disease is a dormant illness that has begun to break out amongst survivors of the incident so long ago. Eventually, Grace finds herself deeply involved in the nightmares of the past, and now has to survive, escape, and uncover the truth of what's been secretly happening in the background of these facilities. Now it's time for me to stop being nice. In spite of her namesake, Grace is not quite graceful when it comes to moving and getting things done. Her lack of experience is very clear, as she is not nearly as seasoned as our other heroes. Grace, even when running, moves at, to me, what was a frustrating snail's pace. I can walk faster than she runs, and let me tell you, when you get that sense of urgency, like something is on your tail, I found myself screaming to this broad, would you haul ass and move? Because my god, even when you're roaming around this place trying to get from point A to point B, it feels like this woman cannot move fast enough. Get her some running shoes. But thankfully, Grace isn't entirely defenseless. She is armed, carrying her own handgun, and a magnum given to her, which is severely light on ammo and should be used only for those very special emergency survival horror situations. You know the ones that can never truly seem to come and you end up hoarding all of this ammunition out of fear that you'll someday need it for that challenge that you don't know is there. Luckily, she's also equipped with a knife, which you can also use to swipe defensively, sneak up on enemies for killing blows, or use to get out of a grabby situation. It's unwise to get into combat with Grace, as is traditional, but the reality is it's just not feasible to take down every foe you see, as resources are indeed very limited. So if you can, sneaking and memorizing the layout of the places that you are in with the maps will be very helpful. And what's more, the map will mark items of interest and locations, so getting lost really shouldn't be too much of an issue. Grace will have to find items for progression, and they are thought out well enough to be believable. Also, returning from Resident Evil 7 are the antique coins, to which I immediately was like, oh damn it, because I never seem to have enough of these damn things in OG Resident Evil 7, and I was not looking forward to having to hunt these things down again. Fortunately, I was pretty lucky and found a good handful of them, and sure enough, you can use them to upgrade Grace's potential from her inventory space, which I highly recommend because trust me, even though you have the faithful good old storage box and typewriter to save, it really never feels like you have enough room in your inventory for anything. You will quickly fill it up finding ammo, herbs, crafting materials, puzzle pieces, and other knickknacks to help Grace's survival. One is the charms, which just by having them in your inventory can improve things like knife durability and damage output. Another new item is this device which collects mutated blood, which you will find scattered just about everywhere. Using this, Grace can craft more ammunition and weapons. So basically what happened here was that they took a system that worked perfectly fine in Resident Evil 2 when you find scraps, and just added another layer of complexity to it, because now, whereas all you needed was just gunpowder and scraps in order to craft something, now you need gunpowder, scraps, and a good amount of stored blood in order to combine them all into a new item. So, take that as you will. One of these items that you can create is a syringe that you can use to give zombies a good poke and make them a little bit more explosive. Which is actually going to be more helpful than you know, because Resident Evil Requiem takes quite a few forgotten pages actually, but one in particular was from Resident Evil 1 Remake, and brings back the good old Crimson Heads. What does this mean? After killing a zombie, you would think you would be over and done with it, but if you leave that zombie dead for too long and routinely find yourself visiting these areas, that zombie will come back to life, mutated, bigger, and stronger. So this fancy gadget will allow you to solve that problem early before you have a much bigger one later. Sadly though, like all other resources, you will have to be very selective on when and where you choose to use this, because once again, you can't fight off everything. You can't. And running is often the best choice. Grace can occasionally shove enemies if you stagger them, but unlike another character, this does no damage. To them, this only gives Grace enough time to get through and move on, which thankfully is more than enough, so if you can shoot them in the leg and push them over, this actually does get you by pretty darn well, and was pretty much my go-to strategy for the whole game when I was playing as her. However, there is another well-known character that I have neglected to talk about up to this point, isn't there? Well, let's put a stop to that right now. Let's reintroduce Leon S. Kennedy. The man, the myth, the legend, the face of the Resident Evil franchise. I'm sorry, Gene, you know it's true. We all love Chris Redfield, we all love Jill Valentine, but come on, man, that hair, the hair, even with our man being in his 50s, that hair cannot be denied. Leon is back, baby, and his decades of experience has come back with him. Leon's gameplay is a stark contrast from Grace. While Leon has his own means of item management and ways of scrounging for goods, Leon at his core is far more equipped mentally and physically to handle just about anything. I would almost go as far to say Leon is kind of your reward for surviving the treks as Grace, because when our man shows up, you know he means business. Character-wise, Leon is very post-Resident Evil 6 action ready. He's got a ton of inventory space. He's traded his knife in for a new battle axe that is very strong, and while it can wear and tear like the knife can, it doesn't break. When it runs low on durability, all you have to do as Leon is sharpen the weapon on the fly to restore its usefulness, which does leave you open for a few seconds, but hardly worth mentioning as I've never been caught in the open with it. Still, something to be careful of on the harder difficulties, because as far as I know, for the first time, this particular Resident Evil game has an absolute ton of zombie varieties. These are not your usual zombie fare. A new strain of the virus, which changed these poor souls, has trapped them in a moment in time before they died, forever capturing what they were currently doing, making them uniquely menacing. So always be on the lookout. You never know what to expect from some of these monsters. Still, with a good headshots and good knee shots, Leon can quickly close in on enemies with his signature and new melee attacks, as well as going for some quick kills with his brand new toy. What's more is now Leon can use enemies' weapons against them. Most zombies will be carrying a variation of debris or weapon, and when they drop them, Leon can quickly use them on another zombie nearby. This is what I'm talking about. Leon is just so fun to play as. He's well equipped for the situation and is just so done with all of this. A man battle-hardened and now in his middle ages and facing what may be his last hurrah due to the disease he's been plagued with. Grace, on the other hand, is an interesting character and does indeed come off like a young woman who really feels like she's in way over her head with all this Asian stuff. She stutters a lot when speaking and has trouble finding her words because she gets stressed out so easily, and thankfully with Leon's guidance as a mentor of sorts, showing her the ropes is gearing her up for one hell of an adventure. However, in my opinion, I don't find Grace as fun to play as for obvious reasons. Her limitations keep her grounded in the, well, survival horror, where running and hiding is sometimes the best option, while Leon ain't got time for that. I know that really does fly in the face of what Resident Evil is supposed to be like, and it's a huge contradiction. I know. Don't get me wrong, I love survival horror. I'm right up there with you, Susie Hunter and Ink Ribbon and all those other greats out there. I know, and I adore these games well, but sometimes it's fun to play as a hero in these games and just wreck the bad guy's day. I am one of the few that really did enjoy Resident Evil 5 and 6 in spite of the complaints that they strayed too far from what made them scary. But for me, I was always on board, not necessarily because of the fear factor. I got Silent Hill for that, but mostly because I enjoy the characters, the world building, the story, and the setting. And Resident Evil Requiem does expand on this and then some. It's like a giant amalgamation of all the greatest hits from different Resident Evil titles. One moment you feel like you're exploring ideas that were introduced in Resident Evil 7, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into action and mayhem that was brought in with Resident Evil 6, which some people might think is a bit much, but I'm not one of them. You might even suddenly be thrust into Resident Evil 2. There's so many ideas going on here, and it feels like a bit of a celebration. I mean, it is the anniversary for Resident Evil after all, is it not? The character acting in the game is superb. The story kept me on the edge of my seat, wondering what was going to happen next, and I will say that there is a huge section later in the game that the trailers have already revealed that hit me with huge nostalgic vibes that really had me pause and just take it all in. From the music and the background to the passage of time, I really do wish I could talk more about these things and go into more details, but sadly at this time, I really think it's best for you guys to have your own experience. Overall, with this game, my experiences were very positive. However, I will say that it's not perfect. No game is, and there are a handful of moments where the game kind of lingers on the theatricality, and you can just kind of wish you could sometimes get a move on, because you feel like it messes with the pace a little, you know? And there might have been some story-related stuff that happens later that I kind of thought should have happened differently, but it's just a personal gripe and not one that hinders the experience at all. And I did come across an interesting glitch or two in the game. I mean, what the hell is going on with Leon's gun straps? That is some serious starch. Also, I mentioned before that Capcom was very generous to give me 2 copies of this game, one for Steam and one for the PlayStation 5. I actually ran into some trouble with the Steam version of the game. While it ran fine overall, the cutscenes would have this weird audio stutter problem at random times and would completely desync from the visuals, and there was nothing I could do or figure out how to solve this problem, and it was frankly ruining my experience. However, the PlayStation 5 version ran perfectly, and I can say this having finished the game multiple times on both releases. So yes, I did have to put up with it. I don't know if this was something that needs to be patched or if it was a hardware issue, but I do know that when it comes to PCs, there are so many variables of things that can go wrong, from CPUs to graphics cards to processing and drivers and who knows what else. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I would recommend a high-end PC with an SSD so you have the best shot at the game running fine. And if you didn't understand any of that jargon that I just spoke, then my point exactly. I would just stick to the consoles because it works perfectly fine there. No hassle needed. And once again, big thank you to my friends at Capcom for giving me the hookup on this. It was greatly appreciated. In the end, I would say Resident Evil Requiem is on par with its previous entries, and is as consistently good as they were. If you enjoyed Resident Evil 7, 8, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, 4 Remake, then you will be right at home here. As per usual, the game does offer plenty of replay value with many challenges, unlockables, and bonus material. At this time, I will say that there is no Mercenaries mode, but in time, I'm sure Capcom will think of something to add on. Remember, Separate Ways was an addition later on in Resident Evil 4, so give it time. Who knows, they might just surprise you. Well, my friends, that was Resident Evil Requiem, at least as far as I could share with my experiences. going off script here. Like, I've already finished the game quite a few times at this point, and it's been quite a journey, and I hope you guys enjoy it too if you decide to get it. Hopefully this video was informative and helping you decide if you wanted to take that leap. Until next time, you can let us know if you like the video any number of ways. You can share a comment, like it, let us know all your feelings, but do keep spoilers out of the comments. We don't want to ruin the experience for everybody like it was being done online with a whole bunch of a-holes just suddenly spreading it around with screenshots and crap. Be courteous. But yeah, we hope to see you again on the next video. What will it be? Who knows? Till then.